Shack. And Lindsay Shack is an architect here in town. She designed the city's first passive house institute home. And she's going to talk to us a little bit about the principles of passive house and give examples of some projects that she's working on currently. We started this process back in July of 2019, and 35 members from the community helped us develop this plan through 12 intensive workshops. The county was represented, as well as the HRDC, MSU, Northwestern Energy, neighbors, businesses, and other institutions. We are in the process of collecting public comment on the plan, and we are planning to go back to the commission on November 17th for feedback on that comment, and we'll present a final plan for adoption on December 8th. Why is Bozeman planning for climate change? I don't think I have to tell most of the people on the call that the climate in Bozeman is warming and will continue to warm. What we're observing based on the 2017 Montana Climate Assessment, Southwest Montana is projected to be 4.5 degrees warmer by 2040, with 25 more days over 90. And for us, that means reduced mountain snowpack, early and rapid spring runoff, potential flooding, followed by drier summers with more drought and wildfires. Bozeman's been tracking greenhouse gas emissions since 2008. This diagram describes our emissions and the breakdown by sector. If we focus in on 2018, you'll see that 38% of our local emissions are from transportation, 33% from commercial buildings, and 24% from residential buildings. And then there's 5% from solid waste, and a fraction of a percentage from our water and wastewater processes. So our total emissions are around 607,139 metric tons of CO2. Since our baseline of 2008, emissions have gone up 16%, while our population has gone up 37%. In our public engagement process, we heard about a lot of really ambitious, exciting ideas. And it's easy to jump very quickly to the cost of the climate solutions. Before we go there, we wanted to first describe the cost of inaction. And this table shows the projected cost of energy use and the social cost of carbon in this gray bar, which is a metric that describes the negative externalities or the negative impacts of greenhouse gas emissions, including increased frequency and severity of natural disasters, keeping in mind that the social cost of carbon is higher in later years. In this planning process, we assigned a cost and savings for each of the solutions through 2050. And we found that we project that the solutions will save $217.5 million by 2050 and avoid another $102 million in those negative externalities. So the natural disasters of 2020 are just another reminder that we're already coping with the impacts of climate change. And in contrast to past planning efforts around climate, this plan really addresses both mitigation, reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, and resiliency. And to us, that means conserving natural resources, strengthening infrastructure to natural disaster, increasing social cohesion, mitigating property and economic losses, and protecting human health. In conjunction with the climate team, we developed this vision statement, position statement for the planning process to guide the development of the plan as well as implementation. So through leadership and collaboration, the City of Bozeman will advance innovative solutions to cultivate a more equitable and resilient low carbon community for current and future generations. We've also developed quantitative metrics for this plan. There's 3 really ambitious goals. The first is that we will reduce our emissions 26% below 2008 levels by 2025. And this is aligned with the Paris Climate Agreement, which the city committed to uphold back in 2017. We'll achieve 100% net clean electricity by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2050. These are ambitious goals, but we were deliberate in establishing these goals because they're the metrics that science tells us we need to achieve. And we're aligned with a lot of other communities in Montana and around the world. The scope of the climate plan, there's 6 broad focus areas. And today I'm going to share primarily the details of focus area 1, healthy, adaptive, and efficient buildings. But I'll also touch on responsible and reliable renewable energy, vibrant and resilient neighborhoods, and diverse and accessible transportation options. In total, there's these 6 focus areas with 16 solutions and then 64 individual actions that will support implementation. As you read through the plan, you'll see that there's a fair bit of discussion about equity issues, and that often touches on the issue of affordable housing. We also addressed human health and well-being considerations, not only physical health, but also mental health. And then we described city assets where the city can lead by example or support the community in adapting to climate change. So the first focus area was healthy, adaptive, and efficient buildings. And here we describe investing in energy efficiency upgrades in existing commercial and residential buildings. We focused on energy efficiency investments that have a positive cash flow. And we referenced a study that describes a return on investment of 4% for deep energy efficiency retrofits and 5.9% for medium retrofits. And the emphasis is on comfort and reliability of buildings, as well as significant cost savings on utility bills for low-income residents in particular. To summarize the actions in the plan around energy efficiency, there's an emphasis on the city demonstrating leadership and providing information and outreach to the community to help build that collective knowledge within the building industry. There's 2 actions related to energy use disclosure for large commercial and residential, and that is designed to build awareness about around energy use and help drive energy efficiency upgrades. There's 1 solution focused on financing and investment tools. We describe the role of green banks in Montana to potentially drive investment in energy efficiency and energy efficient homes, and as well as recognizing the role of tools like property assessed clean energy. The last is focused on rental energy efficiency and safety, where we describe a program where we would introduce a licensing program that would have some minimum standards around energy efficiency and safety. And this is in recognition that 40% of our building stock is rentals. So we want to be able to address that at the minimal level. So that's existing buildings. And then we have to think about the buildings of the future. And this plan calls for achieving net zero energy new construction by 2030. And the emphasis here is buildings will be cleaner and safer. Net zero energy ready homes have been modeled and studied. There's a Rocky Mountain Institute study that suggests the incremental cost of a net zero energy ready home in Bozeman would have a premium of about 2.2%, with a payback of 4.6 years in operating costs if it's an electric heating system. With a natural gas system, the return on investment will be 7.6 years. So solution B, achieving net zero energy new construction, describes resources, training, and recognition for developers that pursue net zero energy new construction. We would also advocate for a statewide net zero energy code. Many of you probably recognize that in Montana, local jurisdictions can't require anything beyond the state adopted code. So we see a role for ourselves in trying to drive forward on energy efficiency in new construction. It's a tremendous opportunity to do it right the first time, and much easier to build it right rather than go back and retrofit. We would also look more closely at the options related to incentivizing and supporting above code construction for those who voluntarily want to go beyond the minimum code. And the last piece of the puzzle focuses on building electrification, which really goes hand in hand with net zero energy construction. And here we talk about demonstration projects, and the city, again, leading by example, and providing additional outreach and education, as well as offering potential incentives. On the topic of renewable energy, we mostly want to emphasize that solutions related to renewable energy focus on utility scale, and that is in large part because it's the most cost-effective and scalable for residents. And so we consider that to be an affordability consideration. And there will also potentially be opportunities for green subscriber-based green tariffs, where people would have the option to buy renewable energy. And here we've discussed the possibility of a low-income carve-out so that it's more equitable across the board. On solution F, increasing community-based distributed renewable energy, this is really just rooftop solar, and we talked about streamlining solar permitting and adopting a solar-ready code provision that's called out in the 2018 International Energy Conservation Code, which will be adopted in the new year. The third focus area, vibrant and resilient neighborhoods. I wanted to just highlight solution G, facilitating compact development patterns, which is one of the biggest driver in encouraging multi-modes and reducing vehicle miles traveled. And so that enhances walkability and enhances affordability. And here we talk about really examining the code for opportunities for additional density and mixed use to make our community more walkable. And another piece I'll highlight is solution H, reducing vulnerability of neighborhoods and infrastructure to natural hazards. And this focuses on planning developments in the appropriate zones and considering fire-resistant building materials and really looking out for the most vulnerable in the community. The fourth focus area that I'll highlight is transportation, increasing walking, biking, carpooling, and use of transit, which is a tremendous part of affordability in Bozeman when you consider how much people spend on transportation with a private vehicle. So we want to explore opportunities for developing a sustainable funding source for transit so that that system can be expanded and be more available to the working community. And we also describe employee trip reduction programs and transportation demand management programs, and then also leveraging parking policies to encourage other modes of transportation, which could help bring down the cost of affordable housing. And finally, developing bike and car share programs. Then I'll just wrap up my portion here by sharing this modeling, the wedge diagram we developed to show how we're going to achieve our goals. This black bar represents business as usual, where the population continues to grow. We use the high growth scenario where in 2050, Bozeman's about 105,500 people. And if emissions continued to grow at that rate, that's where we would be, about 1.2 million metric tons of CO2. And I think it's just important to highlight that over half of our potential emissions reductions will come from building energy efficiency, net zero energy construction, and building electrification. And that's followed by 16% from renewable energy, 8% from that compact development, and 12% from transportation solutions, 3% from waste solutions, and 8% from future solutions that we have yet to identify. But those will really come into play after 2030. And we feel confident that the bright minds at MSU will help us with that last remaining 8%. So I'll just highlight again that we have an upcoming work session on November 17th at 6 p.m. And there will be an opportunity for discussion on the climate plan with the City Commission. And we'll take that feedback, revise the plan, and present a final document to the Commission on December 8th. You can access the plan at bozeman.net/climateplan, and all comments can go to agenda@bozeman.net. So with that, I would love to turn it over to Lindsay to share some real world experience with this.
And actually a perfect segue. If you showing basically what we have to make in our efficient building systems architecture, we've been only champions for trying to address climate stock, but can do that appropriate climate of other climate. We're a climate, which means most dollars are spent on keeping our winter, and all of that we learned brought a method projects that's referred to as. So next slide, I guess I'll have to ask. I could share, where it's coming from, and so seeing Natalie's last slide, ability to electrify the actual energy that we use to build our building, but from of those buildings, you can in some sector, and information is several years old, is grown in severity. Operations responsible for the line actually used by. So what it means is that opportunity to and footprint and energy that we're consuming is inefficient and done. It's our low. This is of existence, and it's especially new. So in all of our company, our standard, we're not all standard, and I'll here in a minute. We're very much in as the rest of the architectural in design our building to minimum amount of energy. So if you could go to the next slide, a little bit of what this method is called Passivhaus, and what Passivhaus is really high tech. This is a word that was coined by the Germans. Poor translation, that it's passive, such as HAU, word for house or structure, and it's appropriate for any homes, and it's the solar building itself. That's maybe a miscommunication. Pretty active building, although passive solar is how it's done. And it slide, all of these are on the globe. For climates, it's possible globe through lots of different. There's 5 principles: affordability and the choice of new structure. Principles that I think are be aware of. Things that we can do to get us to optimal energy consumption doing that after, if what we're overall, carbon, and have a positive impact through our buildings. The first thing you can do, your building properly on solar orientation, have a certain amount of all around your structure. Of course, need high performance windows. Your windows are in your heating system. And then you need a measure, and this is really also that has environmental sensitivity. The airtight enclosure ventilation with heat, it results in clean, healthy. So if environmental sensitivity, perhaps you find yourself in Montana. This home is actually all to do that, because the system that's keeping house at a temperature that is the same system that's delivering air inside places all the time. These 5 things basically get to operate on a machine. It's tossed around a lot. Single family home with a hair dryer. And what you're doing with that airtight, getting the advantage of not only this, but your appliances, fixtures from your Illinois. And they asked her how she heats, and she didn't know, but the idea that existing heat with just by our occupants, and if we design this out as the actual added need to keep your house comfortable, is a very if we go so we're so the institution passed all to be the first on hospital, and I've got her coming up well. My pixel looking at the goals and showing how we achieve, and then ultimately being in or we're locked in the house or being we get. If you could go to this home, is well timed. She has a set that is in the process, and she'd been for more than a week, and that with no occupants. When we had that really end of last weekend, she texted me this morning, and her house is at 6, and she, a little bit last needed it all for the rent. I said was, they're active people. Cold last was here. Nobody there to turn the heat on. The cold weather. It's really good to show the and way to keep it comfortable. So side, I don't have with you all. Be satisfied with for my iPhone. Simple shape, but this is a full of spots and interest and some things, but this is a still, but in estimate this project cost more than the typical price in Bozeman. Fully passive, about 4 feet of came in at $60 a square foot. Still, we built that house starting in, it cost more material, but reasonable price relative to other in the valley. And then the other quickly we have on the board, the project in Jackson, Wyoming. Oh, last that one. Collaborating they're flat. They are experts house, and so working with the affordable housing in order to building 18 project using tax credit. We're not sure yet if we will, because it through the state that they want to put their tax project in Jackson. To be seen that we'll get to build. I wanted to because a workforce housing project, and it is intended to be. And if we don't hit certification, at the very least, it is a structure that operates on a minimum. So there's is the message required by code right now. We understand and build possible if we're correctly. So this project is that knowledge, then bring really great for the tenants of, but it creates a great town, and the law occupation of those buildings will be not only for the tenants. Below render slide, I'd be happy to share. Yeah, statically designed. Generally, we're dealing with forms, but to create some connected outdoor space, but also wall assembly, mass produced, or 3 identical each other to show. But this is how we development that creates housing, that creates more core and energy. But I very much to share these with you guys. Thanks, Natalie, for asking. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Lindsay. So Tanya, do we have any discussion or Q&A in the chat?
Can you hear me at all? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Sorry, I am called in on a phone and a phone system and the computer, so I apologize. Is it echoey?
Sounds fine to me.
Okay. Jeez. I don't see any questions coming in yet. Do the folks who are in attendance, there are 16 of us, does anybody have any questions they'd like to type into the Q&A box? I see something came in on the chat. Let me open my chat here. Lori says that your audio is intermittent. Lindsay, yeah, thank you. Sometimes if you stop your video, your audio is better. It says, could you repeat the cost per square foot?
Yeah, the cost on that single family project was about $260 a square foot. And I think in Bozeman these days is more than that, typically for custom home. Production, not sure about that. But if we're talking custom home design, only $275 a square, over 300 at the minimum, right?
It looks like Terry might have.
A question in the Q&A is, what will it take to get a stricter building code in Montana?
That's a me?
I think Lindsay will have a response too. Go ahead, Lindsay.
Well, it's challenge. Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. I have myself gone to Helena once now, and I hope to go again to testify or to at least support working groups that are trying to improve the code. I think that perhaps our building community is at a different spot when it comes to updating the code. And so that's just been a challenge. And I think that everyone it's fair to understand that the work of our building community, the perspective on it such that they want to like make job sites productive and profitable, and be able to move on from one job site to the next. They're not usually interested in creating more, requirements for themselves, more skills. But I think the market is actually going to do the work for us, because what we see is more and more people coming to us saying, I want to do better. I want a house that performs better. And once people start to understand that not only will this higher performing house be more comfortable and more resilient and affordable to operate, what the code requires almost becomes not necessary anymore. So I think this is really possible in the single family home market. Where we really can have a better impact, though, is not one house at a time. It's getting at the multifamily, higher density market. And the good news is that Passivhaus is actually easier to achieve in a larger building. So these multifamily buildings have an even slimmer margin if we're talking about a premium cost for Passivhaus, because of their volume on the inside, because the actual amount of skin to the exterior is less. And so when it comes down to the code, I think finding incentives for municipalities, for groups, for developers to make these more efficient buildings will have a way of, the code will follow those intentions. But I think it really has to be demonstrated in the Rocky Mountain West, and we're still at the beginning of that. It takes time. Colorado is ahead of us, but they have more of these projects where people get familiar with them, become comfortable with them, believe that they're real, and then they're willing to see that change in the code. And Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, we're just really not there yet. So I'm optimistic, but I'm also patient.
So Lindsay, I think you answered the next question. How do you think a passive design could be more obtainable on a larger scale? Do you have anything to add?
Sure. Yes. I guess in the developers that I've been working with that are interested in multifamily buildings, larger buildings, hotels, dorm rooms, they're quite excited by the economics of doing this. So you realize that once it just starts to become smart business to build a building this way, like I said, the market takes care of itself, and this will be what people want to have and will pay for. So I think that's how we have the best impact and how we get it to scale. We're still in a bit of an education phase of just making people aware that when they're going to go build a building, that building to this method is an option. So the more education, this is a large part of me participating in this process, is I want to understand that the Passivhaus community understands that this method is a huge cornerstone of these climate action goals, because it's the way where we can get our buildings to electrify, and it's the way that we get our buildings to operate on a minimum amount of energy. And in Europe and on the coast, it is just kind of becoming best practice. So we're a bit behind the curve right now in Montana, but I have faith that we're going to catch up quickly, and especially having built projects that people can experience. It's really challenging to get anybody to have full faith in a new system like this if they haven't had a chance to experience it for themselves.
Seeing is believing.
Exactly.
Tanya,
Oh, go ahead,
Tanya, I think Commissioner Cunningham and a few other people have questions.
Yep.
Can they?
Yep, I'm moving through them one by one. So we just did the first two. The next one is from Terry. How important is neighborhood design and layout in providing proper orientation for solar energy maximization?
It's very important. Generally speaking, we have attention to things like, as you realize, like solar orientation, like how close tall buildings are to each other. Building heights matter. If one building's going to heavily shade the next, then you're going to compromise the building next door. Passivhaus takes all those things into consideration. And when we're planning new neighborhoods and new streets and new layouts, it is important to consider that each lot might have some ability to take advantage of the sun. And it means orienting the building envelope, or where basically within a lot one could place a home or a commercial building. And it doesn't necessarily always agree with how we typically do things by the grid. But it's a little bit of something for people to get used to, that each building might be set back within its lot in a way to take best advantage of the sun. But not every lot is going to be perfect for this either. Like, we have to also understand that some lots are a bit encumbered and may just not lend themselves to a house or a building that's really trying to harness the power of the sun. And that just might be reality. But in a majority of cases, we can work out a plan and a layout where we can optimize that potential on each building lot.
And then the follow-up question, also from Commissioner Cunningham: how important is neighborhood and subdivision layout in maximizing solar energy potential for new construction?
I think it's on the scale, on site by site, I guess I would love it if every development that was planned or on the boards right now was given a review for its ability to lend solar accessibility to each of the building lot owners. That would be a really great thing. And I think one of my favorite things about designing in the Passivhaus method is it does require you to be site specific on every project. It's not really set up to mass produce a bunch of monopoly homes, because every site is going to be slightly different. But this can be scaled up, like this project that we're showing here. And I think that when we, the scale of thinking about neighborhoods and subdivisions is also about its relationship to the grid, its relationship to where that power is going to be received and stored, and then how, if anything, we can feed it back to the larger grid, or that subdivision or neighborhood could operate somewhat independently from it, because that would be a very exciting thing. So it's really a scale that is built upon considering solar orientation for each individual building lot.
And then, let's see, any thoughts on how we'll track that these architectural ideas are being adopted?
I have some thoughts about that. Natalie?
Why don't you go first?
Okay. Well, I'll try to be concise in my answer. The best way to track it is to actually look at the performance of the buildings. So it's excellent if we could get every new building that was built in Bozeman to the Passivhaus standard, or to use the Passivhaus standard as, say, a stretch code for energy in our buildings. But if we actually started to honestly assess energy use in our buildings now, we would start to value those things, and really, we pay attention, we put power into things we pay attention to, right? We give energy to that. We elevate and give vision to things that we measure. And if we got serious about understanding the assessment of how buildings perform right now, we would get more interested in building buildings that are more efficient in the future. And so I think as a metric, for example, in the country of Germany, when you sell your house, you have to disclose the energy use of that building. So therefore, if your house is more efficient and you use less energy, guess what? Your house is worth more money. And our system, our American market, is not built that way. But our individual, market demands do respond that way. So if you can make your home or your office building or your school operate with less energy, there are tangible benefits in many different directions. And I think it comes down to being able to measure it And then that can be expressed back to the community. So if we had a mechanism within our town, within the city of Bozeman, to celebrate projects that were operating on a minimum amount of energy and meeting these goals, then it starts to encourage other projects and be incentivized to do so themselves.
Lindsay, that is great because it really actually supports two of the recommendations in the climate plan. One is requiring a home energy score when a home is listed on the multiple listing service. And for commercial buildings, there's a recommendation to disclose energy use intensity, EUI. And as we begin to inventory the large commercial buildings and establish a norm by building type, we can begin to differentiate between different types of construction and performance.
Yeah, I guess I would.
Anything?
That, 5 years ago, in trying to get some builders in Bozeman really interested in Passivhaus. At that time, they would say, "Hey, this all sounds great. We'd love to build a house in this way, but my job is to build houses that people pay me to build, right? It's not my job as the contractor to push this on any client." And I thought that was actually great feedback to get. And so 5 years later, the market is different. Now we have clients that knock on the door and pick up the phone and email the office and say, "I want my house to perform to this level." And so I just share that to express that the shift in the market is happening. And the more that people look into this, they tend to not look at regular building stock the same way again. They realize that it's possible, it's all within reach, and we just have to make the choices to do it. And so being able to measure it and then express it back to the community supports that feedback loop of where we're understanding how we're improving our buildings. There's a more objective and data-driven way to show that. Clients and the people are asking for it, as I'm trying to bring up.
We have another question that's come in. How do trees benefit or hamper heating and cooling?
Question. Thing we do in our energy modeling is definitely model adjacent buildings, nearby trees, kind of any vertical element within 50 feet of the building. And if you have, say, old growth pine trees directly south of your building site, it's going to be a problem. So deciduous trees are not an issue, given that, when we really need that solar gain in the winter, their leaves are gone. But we do have to pay attention to existing old growth trees and tall trees and either try to stay away from them. In some instances, we have had to consider removing them to allow solar gain onto a property, but we typically try to avoid that if we can. But trees are definitely have an impact on the performance of a passive solar element to a home, for sure.
So I'm not seeing any other questions come through on either the chat or the Q&A. Any of the folks in the audience want to submit anything? Natalie or Lindsay, has anything come up for you during the discussion that you'd like to share?
Not specifically, but we are interested in community feedback on, am I muted? No. We are interested in community feedback and specifically in the arena of housing affordability. If there's something that we can do better to address concerns across the board, we're really open to that, and we want your best ideas.
I'm juggling a mouse and a computer. I'm sorry, I unmuted the wrong thing. Could you share your website and the public comment link? That'd be great. Are there examples around town that you know of projects that are kind of piloting or giving some of these building practices a try that are specifically affordable projects?
I don't have them at the ready. There are a couple of projects that are single family homes. One's in Belgrade, in the Las Campañas. I think I'm saying that right, maybe not. In Belgrade, near the interstate. You can actually see this house from the interstate, I think. And that was built by Habitat for Humanity. I believe they completed it in 2017. So it's been there for a while. It didn't reach Passivhaus standard because I think it missed on like the blower door test for air tightness, but it's otherwise built to the method, and that is an affordable project. There's another one, there's another couple more in Bozeman that are like that are pretty close to passive, but didn't quite hit the standard, which means that they're still really excellent buildings. I couldn't speak to the affordability of the other ones. I just know that the one in Belgrade was built by Habitat for Humanity. And, you know, certain groups like Habitat for Humanity, I don't think the Montana group has committed to it, but I know that the Washington, D.C. Habitat for Humanity chapter made a commitment, I think in 2016 or 17, that every project they build will be Passivhaus certified. Because what they know what they're doing is they're lowering the operating costs for the resident. So if they're going to build the house and they're going to get all of the resources together to build the house, they're going to spend, and there is generally speaking a couple of percent, maybe as much as 5% premium of install cost, upfront cost to meet Passivhaus. But then what you're doing is you're operating your house on about 10% of the energy needed for a typical build. So it becomes much more affordable for the occupants. And we do have a few of those projects in Montana already. And I would just also add, Passivhaus are multifamily buildings are happening in Minneapolis, in Boise, in Spokane, in Alberta, in British Columbia, in Saskatchewan. Like there's projects basically all around us in every direction. In South Dakota, it's not like we're cold in Montana and this can't happen. Other communities are, and other builders and developers and architects and other communities, they are doing this and they are figuring it out, and it's not that foreign, and it's just going to take time for this to sort of seep into the rest of our building community here. And I'm hopeful it would become best practice in the future.
Thank you, Lindsay. Another example that might be worth examining is one in Whitehall, Montana, through the National Affordable Housing Network. And I think it's called the Mountain Horizon Solar Subdivision. And the entire layout was designed to optimize solar gain. And they used super insulated techniques and high efficiency strategies and heat pumps and heat recovery ventilators. And those were self-help homes where the owners, the future owners, helped with construction. And the affordability piece on that was pretty impressive. It became a very affordable home, and the heating and cooling costs are very, very minimal. So there's examples in our cold climate. There's also positive examples right here in town, the Larkspur development with the solar hot water and solar PV. And they definitely had an eye towards efficiency. And I'm not sure if they certified under Enterprise Green Communities, but they certainly used that model for affordable housing.
Well, I don't see any more questions coming in on the chat or the Q&A. We'll give it another couple of minutes, but thank you so much. And just to reiterate your dates, it looks like there's space or a link for a public comment for another couple of days. Is that correct, Natalie? You're collecting?
Yes, we're still collecting comment, and anything we receive before the 30th, we can integrate into our packet materials for the work session on the 17th, but public comment will remain open.
Okay, I knew there was something about the end of this week.
Thank you.
Well, thanks everybody for participating. We'll have another virtual brown bag, just like this one, in early December. December 12th is what we're kind of penciling in. It's going to be about subsidized rentals and preserving those in our community, and low-income housing tax credit projects, preserving those, making sure that they don't sunset and convert to market rate properties. So that'll be an interesting conversation. And of course, preservation is a very climate-friendly option as well. So thank you very much, Lindsay and Natalie, for your time today, and everybody else for participating.
Thank you for having us.
Of course.
Thank you.
Bye all.
Bye, everybody.